Right guys, a quick one here, bringing you a couple of clips from Parliament earlier, showing Ian Blackford humiliating himself and the SNP as usual. Most of you will know that Boris Johnson is pushing his Brexit deal through Parliament right now, which I am less than happy with, but it's going to be dumped on us anyway. Yes, the ERG have said they support it, but just reading their summary should worry anyone with the ability to think forward a few years. The ERG themselves admitted it relies on robust government, which given the amount of Remain supporting politicians we have and how often they sell us out, we could literally end up back in the EU 5 years from now. Of course, we can cancel the trade deal with 12 months notice, but can you ever see a Tory or Labour government doing that? Of course not, and anyone who thinks they would is living in Joe Swinson's world of fantasy politics. The end of the EU itself is our only way out of this trade deal going forwards, let me tell you that. But naturally, being Brexit, Ian Blackford essentially shit the bed every time Boris Johnson mentioned it, standing up and putting in points of order that weren't even really points of order. They was party political rants and hypocritical ones at that. Now Boris naturally mugged him off, but on top of that, so did the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle. As you would expect, Blackford was bitching about Scottish fishermen being sold out by Boris, much like old fish lips and her strong Scottish named minister Humza Yousaf did the other day. Of course, before they got called out online by absolutely everyone, including me. Now Ian continues the embarrass to Scotland by opening his mouth once again, because as soon as he does, you know it will be shut down as the ridiculous fantasy that it is. But anyway, enough talk, watch it for yourselves because it is pretty funny.
I will happily give way.
Point of order, Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, I'm seeking your clarification. I'm just wondering how on earth the Prime Minister can talk about taking back control of waters when Scottish fishermen are going to have less access and less fish to catch as a consequence of his con deal.
Can I just say, first of all, it's not a point of order. We're very limited on time. Can we please try and keep to a tight agenda to allow everybody the time to contribute? Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I must nonetheless correct, although that was not a valid point of order, I must correct him in what he says, because in fact, under this deal, we have taken back control of our waters, and indeed Scottish fishermen from the get-go will have access to bigger quotas of all the relevant stocks, Mr. Speaker, and from the end of the transition period, as he knows full well.
Sorry. Look, I understand it's an important day. It's important that we all get on the record. It's more important I also get to the leader of the SNP. What I wouldn't like to do is run out of time by the number of times he wants to stand for interventions. If the Prime Minister gives way, he'll give way straight away. But please, let's try and get the debate underway. At least give yourself time to hear what he's got to say before you disagree. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with great respect to the Right Honourable Gentleman, I do feel I must correct him, because not only will we take back control of our waters, we will increase Scottish fishermen's share of all the relevant stocks. Cod, for instance, going up by 47% to 57%. North Sea haddock going up by 70% to 84%. That's just next year, Mr. Speaker. And in 5.5 years' time, we take control of the entire spectacular marine wealth of Scotland. It is only the Scottish Nationalist Party, Mr. Speaker, that would hand back control of the waters of this country to the UK with spectacular hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, having said that they would...
Sorry.
Prime Minister, that the name of my party is the Scottish National Party.
In fairness, I have pointed it out in the past. It is the Scottish National Party, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wish the Right Honourable Gentleman to know that I am using the word nationalist with a small n, and I don't think that he would disagree with that, which is semantically justifiable, I think, under the circumstances. And yet, in spite of that nomenclature, Mr. Speaker, they would hand back control of Scotland's waters and go back into the common fisheries policy. What this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is take back control. Absolutely not. Take back control of the spectacular marine wealth of Scotland and the rest of the UK. Because just in a moment, in the heart of this bill is one of the biggest free trade agreements in the world, as we've discussed in this chamber many times, Mr. Speaker, a comprehensive Canada-style deal worth over £660 billion, which, if anything, should allow companies to do even more business with our European friends, safeguarding millions of jobs and livelihoods in our UK and across the continent. In less than 48 hours, we will leave the EU single market and the customs union as we promised, and yet British exporters will not face a sudden thicket of trade barriers, but rather for the first time in the history of EU agreements, zero tariffs and zero quotas. And just as we have avoided trade barriers, so we have also, Mr. Speaker, I think that plenty of members want to speak, so I've already taken plenty of interventions and points forward. I'm going to make some progress. In the UK, I think, Mr. Speaker, I've already given way quite a few times to the right honourable gentleman. And there is no jurisdiction for the European Court of Justice.
Point of order, Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, I feel I have to point out to the House that the historic principle in Scotland, as established by law, it's the people of Scotland that are sovereign, and it's the people of Scotland that will determine to take them back into the European Union with independence.
The Prime Minister, Prime Minister, just to say, as the leader of the SNP knows, it is not a point of order, and I'm desperate to hear what he's got to say in his contribution. Rather than use it up now, why doesn't he just save it to get others in? Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. Of course, it was the Speaker of Scotland who took the sovereign decision, quite rightly, to remain in the UK, a once-in-a-generation decision. I think it highly unlikely the people of Scotland will take a decision to cast away their newfound freedoms and, indeed, the newfound opportunities, not least over the marine wealth of Scotland.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.